this is one of the larger pieces to a bedroom suit that my husband bought when he was 19 years old, so it had sentimental value. At the time that he got it, it had a very faux finish on the top of it, which really, by the time it got to this point in his life and in our home now, it really didn't fit, and the finish looked very dated. It was supposed to be Spanish style, but this piece really isn't Spanish, it's just heavy. So at the time I first redid this, I think it was 4 years ago now with Heirloom Paints, this is weather vane that I added black antiquing over. And at the time, Jim was not ready to have anything structurally changed on this. And I get it. It was a sentimental piece that he had spent a lot of time taking care of over the years. First piece you buy and you're able to take care of it, you have attachment to it. But now at this point, we're going to do a panorama of the room when I finish introducing this. But it's very heavy still in this space. It's beautiful with the weather vane. I love the finish, but we're going to lighten the finish now. And one of the other things we're going to do, I can't change these doors. These are a solid piece that they cut out. There's not anything I can take off. But down here on the bottom, these extra clunky pieces here and more of those on the drawers to the long, low dresser with the mirror are going to come off. And we're going to show you how relatively easy it is to get those off. It does create more work in the finishing. You can't just pop them off and then slap paint over it. Well, you can as long as you don't mind that the finish doesn't look good, but it's going to take extra work to do that. So hopefully when we lighten this, and it's going to lighten to a very pale yellow, that in this room it will then feel lighter. And I'm also going to be changing out the mirror that is over the long dresser into something that is going to look more modern and less heavy, but it is also an antique mirror, so it's not completely clashing in the styles. So that's what's going to start happening with this. So the first things we're going to be showing you is how we're taking off as much of the extra clunky pieces on it as we can to simplify the design. We're going to show you how to pop off the decorative pieces that are added on. You kind of have to test a piece of furniture because some things will come off, some won't. Like this top frame here will not come off of this piece without splintering the main part of the drawer rather. So there's minimal things that can come off of this, but every little bit helps to make it a sleeker design for modern use. So what you're going to be watching is from the overhead camera, how to cut along the edge to break the paint lines, and then how to work on popping these off. And we're going to show you the small pieces, and then we're going to do it on 2 other pieces, some sample pieces for how to get them off as well. Jim's going to cut it and pry these off. It's safer to do it with the type of knife he's using, so you're less likely to slip and have a razor blade cut you. And once the paint line gives, then you can use the thick one and it starts to come loose. You just have to be patient so that you don't angle down and gouge out the front. This had some glue under it and some brad nails. 3 of the nails disabled came out the leg, but 1 did not. This will have to be sanded, but there is a rim of paint and finish on here now. So one of the things I will do before we just do the main sanding on this is I will use a carbide scraper and go along those edges. And that will make cleaning this up and sanding it much faster. These little narrow, it's less than a 1-inch wide carbide scrapers. The only place I've found them where I live is at Ace Hardware. I haven't been able to find them online, but they're really great for something like this. And we're going to show you 2 other shapes that were on this and getting them off. Sometimes the thicker blade works to start with, and sometimes you have to use the super thin one to make sure you've got that paint line broken when you start trying to pry these off. This has already been cut to save time on the video, so now Jim's going to be working on prying it off. This isn't something that you can't do yourself. You certainly can, but it's easier with one person holding the drawer and another person doing the tapping on it. We're splintering the front. Ugh. Okay. And this is going to need fill and sand to take it together. They put a much better bead of glue on the center of this than they did on other pieces. So with something that's that tight, these pry bars, they're actually heavy gauge plastic that you can get at the hardware store. This also has an area with some more glue, but it's fixable, just requires some extra work. So off camera, we're going to take the rest of these off, and I will also do the scraping along any of these lines off camera, and then we'll show you the sanding. To get these pieces smooth, and to remove the glue that was under here, an orbital sander, a little triangular one with 60 grit sandpaper has been used on this. And now I need to put some fill on this. I'm going to fill where the handles were because I'm using a different set of pulls for this once I get it done. And it's just a process of working your way through it. I put a piece of green frog tape on the inside of the drawer underneath the holes for this so that I can fill and it doesn't come out the other side, because these happen to be pretty good size holes on this for what the original hardware was. This is a new bottle because I've already been working on some of the other drawers. So it's a little harder to get it out. And on this, I want to make sure it's filled. But then I'm going to add a little bit extra on that once I know that fill went in, to save yourself having to fill this twice. You can add a little bit of a bump onto there. And right now I'm hitting all the places where there were the staples holding this, and some divots. And there's a pretty good divot here where a piece of wood pulled out. It's actually veneer over particle board, which I'm kind of surprised about because I didn't realize this when I was working on it before, that there was particle board in this. And for 1973, that's kind of unique. And even on these pieces, I'm not trying to get it completely smooth to the wood because it's going to get resanded. But you don't want just mountains of the putty sticking up either. And now once this dries, and it can take several hours depending on the humidity and the temperature, then it's going to be going back, sanding it again to sand this all smooth and to look for any places that I might have to fill a second time. It's worth taking that second step because the divots will show in a paint job. All of the drawers have had 2 rounds of fill put on them and sanded twice. We've used blocks. We have used, not sanding sponge blocks, but actually blocks of wood with 2-sided carpet tape, the really thin, not the heavy duty stuff, to hold the sandpaper on place, to be able to get in tight and to keep a flat run on this. We'll insert a photo of what those look like because I forgot to bring them in here right now. But you want to make sure this is completely smooth, that there aren't any ridges by any of the fill, that it's not smooth on it, but it comes up with a bump on it, because that will show really badly through your paint. Every one of those spots will show badly. So you wind up sanding more than you expect when you have to do wood fill, but it's worth it to get a pretty finish in the end instead of one that looks like it was just paint thrown on it and nobody cared to do any prep work on it. So I'm going to change the position of this and we're going to film from up above, because what I'm going to be putting on this is actually liquid shellac. If I'm doing a small repair somewhere, the spray shellac is the easiest, or if I'm sealing a whole piece of furniture that I want to seal smells from coming through or bleeds from coming through, a lot of times the spray is the easiest. But on a spot like this where you really want to get into all the crevices, and I don't necessarily want or need the shellac up on anything else, I'm going to use a disposable sponge brush and put it on here. I'm going to flip it up because shellac is a thinner product, and if I try to put it on here, it's more likely to create a run. So we're going to readjust the cameras and show you putting that on there. The shellac was gently stirred off camera. You don't ever want to stir any type of top coat with a hard stir to it when it's oil-based. It creates a lot of bubbles that you cannot get rid of. They'll stay in there and then that will create a rough surface. So I'm going to use the disposable brush because then it's just, I don't have to worry about cleaning it. And it's going to give me a nice smooth surface. You want to be in good light so you can see that you have actually covered everything. The other reason I wanted the shellac on this, the liquid, is because I've got several different things going on here. I've got some leftover paint, I've got some new wood putty, I've got some raw wood. So the liquid shellac will do a better job of sealing all of that and giving me a nice surface to work with. So off camera, all the rest of the drawers are going to have this done to them as well and allowed to dry. One of the things I didn't talk to you about for why I put the shellac on here. Any surface will give a different sheen depending on what the surface is when you apply paint to it. The raw wood, some of a painted finish, the finish that wood putty has if you don't seal it, all of those, if you just put paint over it, will give you highs and lows in the sheen because the paint is absorbed differently into those surfaces. So by putting shellac on here, I have sealed this surface so that now the paint is just adhering to the shellac. Shellac is also very helpful over woods that tend to bleed tannin. Spraying shellac on those before you paint them is a really good idea after you have deglossed. And then also, if you find that there's a spot that you didn't see when you were cleaning, you've really cleaned well, even used the green Scrubby and the liquid deglosser, and you still have something that's coming through the paint, that's a time to apply shellac and then start painting again. Not over the whole thing, but over the space that you're having that oil come through, because sometimes there's something that's embedded into the wood or the surface that you just can't get deep enough into to clean it completely out. Now, when the shellac dries and you rub your fingers over it, there's a very, very slight roughness. It's not anything scratchy, but you feel there's a little bit of texture to it. You want to take a green Scrubby, and in this case, it's one that I just use for sanding purposes. And you want to sand this. It won't leave much residue at all, but you will feel that now this surface is just super, super clean. I don't even have to wipe this off with a damp cloth because I'm ready to degloss this whole thing. And I know where this dresser was. I know how it's been being cleaned and dusted for the about 4 years since I painted it. So I know the wipes are going to be plenty for this. So that's all I'm going to need to do on this. I also, any places where we had scuffed up, I also applied shellac to those too, because there was raw wood there in trying to get some of those design pieces off. So that's all that needs to be done to this. I'm going to do this to all the other drawers and the cabinet pieces that are still in the bedroom, and it'll be ready to start painting. When you're painting drawers, it gives a more professional finished look if you paint the inside of the drawer. And inevitably, if you don't, there's going to be runs that get down on this, there's going to be partial. So when you open the drawer, you've got a unfinished, partially painted edge here. From years of working with paint, I'm skilled in being able to come in and just with a brush paint that with no tape. If I'm doing one coat on something, that's probably what I'm going to do. But knowing that I'm using a very pale yellow, it's going to need 2 and I'm certain 3 coats, because yellow is like the purer whites. It's very difficult to get full coverage because of the lower amount of pigment in it. So what I wanted you to see is a simple solution to make it fast to paint and you don't have to worry about your edges, is to tape all the way around. Some drawer panels on older dressers, older kitchen cabinets actually have screws on the inside, and you could simply take them off, paint them, and put them back on, and just leave the center part of the board that's hidden behind the panel here unpainted, just painting in enough of a border to have a smooth edge. If that's how your drawer panels are made, it is definitely the fastest, easiest way to do it. Just take them off, paint them, and put them back on. But this is also a fast, efficient way. Putting on good tape, I use green frog tape, it doesn't bleed. So I never touch the blue stuff. I've had it fail too many times in my life, and when I discovered green frog tape, it was like, yes, only thing that will be in the shop now. Or the yellow if I'm working on a fragile surface. So we're going to zoom in with the cameras and let you see exactly how this tape is on here. And then I'm going to show you how, with these narrow edges like this, I use a flat art brush to paint them instead of the large Syntec. When I painted this the first time with Weather Vane, I was in a hurry to get the guest bedroom put together because we had family coming in, and I did not take the time to do the back of these drawers, drawer fronts. So now, redoing it this time, I'm going to take the time to do that. This can of paint, which is the new color Kind by Heirloom Traditions, has been stirred off camera. Always stir the paint a good 2 to 3 minutes when you get the can from the company, and then every time you do a coat of paint, stir the paint again, because this has 3 components in it. It has primer, it has type coat, and it has paint. Now, on the back of these drawers, since they are so narrow, I am just going to smooth them with the brush, and I'm rolling the edge because you can get overage of paint here that will leave bumps and make a mess. This is the direction the grain's going. It's a very rough piece of wood. They did not sand the back of these drawer panels, so I am choosing to go with the grain. So that it's easier to paint and it fills better. But you should be able to see this is giving a really good coat of paint. When you have panels like this that have frames on them, I have found consistently that to not mess up the paint that you have already rolled, do the center panel first, the inner frames here, and then last do the outer frames. And this is going to be a good one for you to see how well this paint coats, because you're going to have such a contrast between the center, all the different colors that are here, and the dark of the Weather Vane. I tapped there so that I don't create puddles in these corners when I get in here with the brush to pounce into that corner, so that I've got coverage all the way into the corners. Don't be stingy with the paint. You don't want to put a gallon of it on, but you also don't want to try to stretch the paint because you feel like it's expensive. That's how you're going to wind up doing 4 or 5 coats instead of 2 to 3. Go across the brush strokes, pull up onto these spots, these edges. I'm not rolling super hard that any contrasting color against these gray rollers will appear like you're getting a lot of paint on there. I'm going back to make sure my roller marks are gone because I can't roll this in this way. It's just going to scrape, the plastic is going to scrape off my edges. You can also use this edge here to get into the corners to catch any runs or puddles. See right there, I created a mark. Now when I go around to do this frame edge, I'm not going to have to get back into the inside. So I'm going to be able to protect where I have already rolled. And you can see my brush is going a little bit sideways along that edge so that I'm not pushing my brush back into where I have already painted. And by having the tape on here, I don't have to worry about that edge. I can just pay attention to the part that's going to be visually seen. About every 3 or 4 drawer fronts or cabinet doors, if I were doing that, I would switch to a second roller and drop the first one into a bowl of water, then wash them both after the next set, and then squeeze them dry in layers of paper towel and start painting again. But you can see as a first coat, this is a nice, heavy, smooth coat. 2 coats won't do it with yellow. I already know that. I checked with another drawer front to make sure I was going to have enough paint for this project. And so it's going to continue from here on. I'm going to paint the rest of the drawer fronts, and then we'll also be showing you how to do the long part of the long dresser, its top, and a big panel on the side of that large armoire that goes with this. The first coat of the color kind, the pale yellow, has dried on this for a couple of hours now. Because it's a very light color, I gave it a little bit longer to dry. It's definitely going to take 3 coats to fully cover with this, but that is very common with yellow. Yellow, like white, is very hard to get full coverage with. And you might say, well, why didn't you just prime it? That would save you paint. Yes and no. It doesn't save me any time in painting, but primers are notorious for creating texture in future coats of paint if you don't know how to properly sand the primer and remove all the sanding debris. And if I'm going to have to do extra sanding between coats of paint, that defeats the purpose for me of just being able to put this on. And if I put on 3 coats of HTP, I know I'm going to have a gorgeous finish, and I'm not going to have to mess with texture as long as I have applied it correctly. If at any point when you're applying the paint and it dries and you see an area of texture, that has to be sanded and the sanding debris removed with damp paper towels or you're going to create more texture with each coat of paint. When you have something small like a nightstand, it is a lot easier to flip it upside down, and I can get to almost all of this except the very top to paint this. So that's what I'm going to do with this to make my life easier. Yes, you can put the legs, prop them up on paint cans and stuff, but it's still really hard to get to the inside. I didn't do that when I painted this the first time, and I can see areas on the inside that I missed. And then under here, I didn't do a neat job, so now I have it taped off so that when I paint it this time, it will be finished in a better way. When you've got a really tight spot like this on legs, this is where a 1-inch angled brush is your friend. This one happens to be one of the ones from the set of small brushes that HTP sells. And they hold up just like the Syntec brush if you clean them properly. By going horizontally with the paint, when I come back now to use the roller, it'll be very easy to get a smooth finish. You can pounce into the grooves. It's the same thing you would do with the spindles of a chair. Go horizontally first. And then vertically. If you see where it lifts a little bit, wants to go a little thinner, you can pounce, just like with a true applicator. And you could do this with a 1/4 piece of a true applicator, but I'm so used to using the roller that I'm fine with that. So I'm going to do the rest of these legs, and then I'm going to show you working on the body. Okay, now it's in the frame for you. It's really tempting when you're painting to go, oh, I'm just going to paint the whole front of this and then roll it. And you'll be really sorry that you did, because it won't want to roll out. So you want to do sections of it. And roll them. Well, Jim's got this tipped for me. It's making it easier to see. Now on the side, I have some paint that got over there. I'm not ready to paint the sides yet, but I need to take care of that so I don't get lap marks. Now it can set back down. And we're probably going to need to shift the camera again. I will get the underneath of this when I flip this over. But I still want to roll under there. So that I don't have ridges, because the top side of it, the underneath side down here, is actually what's more likely to ever be seen. And you can see on these curved pieces, I'm going horizontally on them as well. And just swirl the brush to get into those tight places. It's okay that the paint isn't going in one direction because I'm going to roll it. I'm rolling this side first because I don't want lap marks on it. Whoop, there's some spots that I missed. Okay. That's a hole. Oh. Yes, they do. And the more detail there is in something, the more likely they are to hide. And you can see you can pounce with the roller just like you can a true applicator to help you get the paint smoothed and leveled out. And now what a minute ago looked like a pretty bad, ugly coat is now much better. Jim, I'm going to need a board just under the very front of this so I can get the front edge, please. Doesn't have to be huge, just so we can get this lifted up. There we go. Yay. Right under there is a place that can show unpainted. If you don't wiggle your brushes underneath where there is a space between part of what you're working on. And again, I want to get on this side because I do not want lap areas on it. The same thing on this trim that is at the bottom. You want to swirl the brush into it. You don't want to overload the brush, but you've got to have enough paint to get a decent amount in there, and that's something you just figure out as you're working with it. Catch anything so there's not a lap line on the top, which will be the thing that I do last. It's repeating the same order, except I'm going to have a panel here. That I can paint. And again, don't go down and do the whole thing. You can see I keep dipping back into the paint. I'm not trying to spread the paint as thin as possible. There are bubbles forming, that's fine. And as I keep going over it, my first rolls were a little firmer. These rolls are lighter. And that's what you have to watch out for. It happens to me too, that little tip on the end there will scratch sometimes. And on the very bottom here, I'm going to do exactly what I did before. Going on the bottom first because I know I got paint over that. And double check that I don't have runs here on the front. Got a run there that I didn't see. So I need to get in there and get that taken care of. And right there, because I've over rolled, I'm going to need to lightly sand before I do the next coat of paint. You can see on the edges here where that I had rolled when this was upside down. Most of this remained smooth, which is not a problem, but there were a couple of places where there was some overage of paint. So I sanded that down, I've wiped it off. This whole top was deglossed to start with when I deglossed the whole base. There's a lot of texture in the wood of this. That's just the condition that the original finish was in, and I did not want to sand the whole thing down before I started painting with the weather vane to start with, and I had no desire to do it now. It's not going to show enough in the final finish for it to matter. It's taken 3 coats, which I pretty much expected for all the rest of this, and so now I'm going to put the first coat on here, let it dry, and then off camera I will do the final 2 coats. But when you're working with a surface like this, you cannot piddle around putting the paint on. And just like any other time, don't try to save the paint. Get a good coat on there. You can see there are bubbles. That's fine because I need to roll hard enough in that first roll that I'm getting rid of the brush marks. Now I'm literally just, there's no pressure at all. I'm just guiding the roller. And then leave it alone and let it dry. Don't keep rolling. The last coats of paint have been on the drawer. It's been drying. I'm pushing it a little bit. So what I have done is I have put green frog tape here to protect it from the metal screw that's on the back of this jig. These jigs, which I will pick one up after we finish drilling to show you, they're really, really helpful in keeping your drill points, because it's got a drill guide in it, to keep everything exactly the same spot in drawers. We have 2 drawers that go to the nightstand that are the smallest drawers. They're getting drilled at one right after the other. Then we have a next size set of drawers. Those will all get drilled together in a series after we have reset the jig. It takes a little bit to figure these jigs out, and there are some really good videos on this one. It's my favorite one because you have so many places you can adjust, you can tighten, you can rearrange it. And in this case, because we've got a dip down in this drawer, and we need to get down in that valley to drill, we're also using a piece of wood here to keep the jig level when drilling this. So the next thing you're going to see is this actually being drilled. And we checked the marking for where we wanted it in the center of the drawer to start with, marked that, and set the jig according to that. We weren't trying to just mess around with the jig and figure out where the jig's going to fit the center, because your ruler isn't long enough to do that. So you still have to mark your drawer and then you adjust the jig. One of the things you need to remember when you're setting these jigs up and you're measuring, on both of these drawers we have measured from the top right front of the drawer, so that's the jig. If we needed to put 2 handles on here, we would flip the jig and put it to the top here. We wouldn't go one corner on the bottom, one corner on the top. That way, when you've got a series of drawers or whatever, everything is going to line up square. Also, your drill bit needs to be slightly smaller than whatever screw you're using, or it will not hold the handles in place. We wanted something whimsical on these drawers, so I found large bumblebee pulls. It's hard to find really big pulls, and the big armoire is a massive door, so it needed a bigger piece on it. This is too shiny for what I want to use it for, so this is going to get toned down with some of the antiquing gel. But it's centered in the middle of this and it's ready to go, other than fixing that. These are currently super high sheen, and I want to mute that down. I mean, if that was the style you were going for in your room, it's perfectly fine. But I want this to be not super feminine. I want it to be able to go with whoever gets this bedroom set down the road. So by using black antiquing gel, I should be able to brush this on, wipe it off, get some of the sheen back, but get some really clear details into this bee so that the details of it show up instead of the light hitting it and muting those details. I want to get into all of the grooves on this. You don't want this just floating with the antiquing gel, but you do want to get down into all the grooves. The next thing I'm going to do is take a folded paper towel and pull straight across. Now, if I put both of these side by side, now you should be able to see this is muted, but there is a lot better detail on them, which is what I want. This is softer, it's not brassy. I am not going to do anything with the underneath base. There's no need, it's really not going to show, but now I have a more elegant piece to this bee, much like the bee motif on antique pieces has been used in the past. The reason there is tape all over the top of this is I did all 3 coats of the bottom part of this cabinet. If you remember, there's a run of a braided-like trim that's got a lot of detail that you really have to swirl the brush to get into. That would completely mess up the top edge here because I'd be re-rolling too soon over fresh paint or reasonably fresh paint. So I taped this off so that now I can do the entire top and not have those lap lines. There are a couple of ways you can do a long surface like this. You can apply it with the true applicator, swiping it on and pouncing. The difficulty a lot of people have with doing that is just like you can roll too long, you can pounce too long and wind up with circle marks in the top of your flat surface where you've been working. Flat surface is something you cannot piddle around on. You really have to get yourself in gear, have all your tools ready, and move. Keep moving quickly. I'm going to show you that the other thing that people have happen is they'll have pictures showing there's like a stripe here, and a stripe here, and a stripe here that looks kind of rough on the finish, and they don't know what happened. What happened is every time they painted a section with brush and roll, they lapped at exactly the same point. So you have to stagger with each coat of paint. So on this first coat, I'm going to come in about this far, so it's probably going to take me 4 sections to do this. This is a really long dresser top. But then when I come back for the second coat, instead of painting down to here, I will paint to here, roll that, then roll a bigger section and move myself down. That way I'm not continuously lapping at the same point. If you lap at the same point and you put on 2 coats of paint, at those lap areas you have put almost 4 coats of paint, which is going to cause it to be raised in comparison to the pieces on the side. And you don't want that. The other thing is, this is the roller I have been doing on the bottom. It's got a lot of detail. It's got those really coiled big chunks on the side that you really have to be able to pounce in and press. This roller has been used a lot, so it's a little bit softer, and it's perfect for getting into tight spaces, pushing it in, and stippling just like you would with a true applicator or a piece of a true applicator. But for this top, I don't want to use my older roller. I want to use a brand new roller, or one that I've only used on maybe 1 or 2 small projects, because it's still really, really firm. This one, I can squish in with my fingers, same pressure, it gives tremendously. This one, I really have to push to get it in, and it's going to give me a better surface on the top of this. So we're going to start painting it. My brush is a mess because I've been swirling it into those tight spaces on other parts of this. The other thing I did to save myself is I took that older roller and moved it completely out of my workspace because it would be too easy to accidentally grab it and be really unhappy. I'm dipping just the tip of my brush and dipping multiple times, as opposed to trying to get a huge amount. Places like that, that's a divot I didn't see earlier, so I'll get some paint down in there. Knowing that I want to go across my brush strokes the very first round that I do, I'm taking my brush strokes this way on the top. I'm not throwing it every which way, because that honestly, even though you want to get this paint on in a hurry, putting it every which direction will tend to cause you to over-roll. There's lots of highs and lows here, but when I start rolling the roller the other way, all of that starts blending in, so that you're going to wind up using less coats of paint. You want to roll enough, just firm enough, and this isn't hard, to get the roller marks out, the brush marks out. But not like you're rolling roll paint. Now I'm just letting the roller roll itself. I'm just guiding it. Make sure any bubbles are popped. And I'll go back one more round to help take care of those areas where it wanted to go light. When I start to paint the next section, I make sure I touch back into the wet, but if you notice, I'm not going way back up in it. Very lightly roll where that seam matches. Where that wanted to go dark. And roll a little bit more to even that out. There are small bubbles forming, but those will clear up with the second roll. If you're getting gigantic bubbles, it's too much paint. That you saw how heavily I put on. So another reason you get the huge bubbles is rolling too hard. Being careful to barely get back into. I try to avoid going farther than 1/4 of an inch into areas that have already been rolled. This needs to dry, and since it's a light color, I let at least the first coat dry 7 or 8 hours. You can put it on sooner, but you're going to risk texture in the top of what you're working on. I'll also be washing because I'm waiting that long, I'm washing this roller out, and I will wash the brush because it's been being used for several hours now, and it just needs a good cleaning before I do the next coat on here. This has been drying for probably 12 to 14 hours because I was working on some other pieces, including the doors to this. But one of the reasons that I have tape along the front of this is it's very clear when you're looking down at the bottom of this where my wet edges met. Even though I rolled them, I barely went over, they're very, very clear. It's smooth to the touch and it looks fine right now. But if I continue to do my wet edge to wet edge on these same points, I'm going to get a buildup of a ridge because there's going to be more layers of paint there. So coming down this, I have marked where every one of those were, and I'm going to then stagger so that when I do the wet edge this time, I'm going to come past this. And I know I'm going to need a third coat on this because of yellow. And this yellow is much, much paler in person than it's showing up on camera. It's a very hard color to photograph and film, but it's a beautiful, very pale yellow. That's really, really important when you're doing a large flat surface like this. That light is going to play across and you're going to see every little bobble. So you want to give yourself as many ways to not create those bobbles and ridges. But you'll see that this second coat starts to really give a very beautiful, almost full coat. And it looks full until it dries, and then you can see where it's going to need a third coat. I will do part of this just to show you what I'm talking about with the marking, and then I'll finish it off camera, and I'll finish the third coat off camera. And again, I'm using the new roller for this top. It's the same one I used before, but I'm making sure that I have one that's really good and firm. Going past that original lap mark. And I'm going probably about 7 inches past it. And before I forget what I'm doing with it, I'm going to go ahead and stick a piece of tape right there. But I know that's where my lap point is going to be. Your rolls are just firm enough to get those brush marks gone, but not so hard like you would be rolling to roll paint on a wall. And the best way to do it is to have your first rolls across the brush marks. And now all I'm seeing in the top of this is the grain lines. There aren't any bubbles left on it. And you can see my roller is not full of paint. Yellow on the gray is going to show up, but it's not going to be soaked. Next, the next section here, exactly like I did before, I'm not going to go way into where I already have it wet. And I usually will just go ahead and do a little bit right here on that wet edge so that I know I'm not going way into it. Then I've got a lap mark here, so I can come all the way down here. And I should be able to get all of this last section in one coat. But you can also see I'm moving quickly to get this top done. Especially on a long surface, you do not want to spend a long time trying to paint it, trying to be perfect in your brush strokes. And this is ready to dry, to be ready for its last coat. The third coat of paint has dried on this. It was almost ready at 2 coats, which really surprised me, but there were a few places where it was a little bit thin, and I knew that was going to bug me, so I just put a coat over the entire thing. It's easier to do a full coat than parts of a coat. And depending on how big the surface is. This is a really long surface. This is like 75 inches. This thing is a monster. So when you're doing a long surface like that or on a tabletop, the staggering really helps with the lap lines. The first 2 coats of paint, I can't find the lap line anywhere. But my final coat of paint, I can slightly see that lap mark, and depending on how light is playing across the surface, it's going to show. 99% of the population would never notice it, but if it's in your home and you see it all the time, you're going to see it, and I'm going to show you how to fix it. It seems to be blacks, dark blues, and light colors. The light shows any of these marks really heavily on. The medium colors it doesn't seem to show up as much on. But here's a trick for how to take care of it. I have wadded the daylights out of a piece of paper bag, grocery bag. And I mean taking it apart, wadding it up. I'm not going to do that because it'll come through the microphone like a absolute crunching disaster. But I have the 3 spots marked where my lap mark was, and to find them, I actually had to get down like this, looking across to see them. This has dried for about 2 hours, this 3rd coat. This is going to scare a bunch of you, but this is why if you're going to distress this paint, you've got to do it in a hurry, because it's really, really fights coming off. So what you do is you take that wadded paper and you sand with it, and you really get into it and you really push hard, like you're scrubbing off dirt. And you go across just that area. And it's going to take you, and there's not anything really coming off on my hand, so I'm not going to degloss this again. I don't even need to wipe it down. So it's going to take you on each one of those spots a good 3 or 4 minutes of steady sanding with this. And you can see there's not anything coming off on the paper, but it's smoothing that completely out. Once you've done that buffing, this is the hardest thing you'll do. If you've got those marks, you're going to have to do 1 coat over the whole thing. And that means you've really got to move fast, because you want to be able to roll without leaving roller marks, and this paint dries fast. So it's definitely not a coat that you could do, say, outside in a garage. It's going to be too hot and you're going to have a really messed up finish. But if you work quickly on this, getting your paint on the top, and in this case, I do not go, I'm going to have to right here, but along this edge right here, because I'm trying to do the whole edge, I want to keep as straight a lines as I can over this entire surface. It's literally get the paint on as fast as you possibly can. For most people, this is not doable with every coat of paint. You just won't work fast enough. But when you've got a good coat of paint on already and you're just trying to smooth out that top, most people feel comfortable enough to put the paint on this fast. Kind of think about you're trying to do a speed test with yourself, or how fast can you do this. And then you're going to go back to where you started, because that's where it has already started to dry. Looking for any brush strokes. And stop. Let the paint do its magic. I'm not going to paint this side on camera, because you saw how on the short nightstand I painted this, or you can go back and look at that chapter. These areas like this where they're really deep and you're fighting to get the area in here stippled and smoothed so that you're not putting on umpteen coats of paint, it's really easy to come up on here and create ridges or create areas where you've got partially dry paint, and then when you try to do this nice smooth center panel, you have areas that are with texture or ridgy and they just don't look nice. So it's really simple to just run a bead of tape down on this. Green frog tape seals beautifully, and that's going to allow me to paint these really persnickety pieces here. Get down in here, get this edge really nicely stippled and rolled. And then my very last thing, after I have painted these pieces, will be to paint this flat panel all the way down, and it's tall enough that I'll do it in 2 sections. I'll go about halfway, paint it, roll it, and then do the second half the same way that I did the top of the dresser. And again, on a side panel like this, you want to do the same thing. When it's a massive big piece like this in height, you want to stagger where your lap lines are so that you don't get ridges. And I have the front all taped off because I'm not going to be painting the inside of this. I'm choosing to keep the inside of the doors and the inside of the cabinets on both cabinets the weather vane that I originally did this. The yellow and the gray look very nice together, and you'll see later that I have a lot of transfers on the inside of it. You can see some on the drawers here. I didn't want to lose those. So this was a win-win for me of not having to get all the way back in the crannies of this. And I didn't empty it out for you. I mean, you'll just have to deal with the fact I store things in here, primarily stencils and transfers. But that's why this tape is on here. It will make life so much simpler to take care of. These doors are trickier than most doors to figure out where the handles go. The small doors were just like regular cabinet doors that come together. But these doors have a lap here of wood, and then this door panel overhangs a wood panel behind, so that when these close on the armoire, you have a close here, because you can't have a center panel piece of wood because it would make it impossible to pull out the drawers inside the armoire. So this became trickier to figure out what we were doing. So I put on 2 pieces of the yellow frog tape only because it was wide enough to do what I needed. I wasn't worried about, it wouldn't have been a big deal to put the green frog tape on here, but I needed to know that these were lining up. And fun fact, this piece here is narrower than this piece here. So we had to figure out a level line with the doors lined up level so that the pulls are going to be level. And then we used the doors were pulled apart, but we used this jig to find the exact spot that we wanted the knob. And then instead of drilling all the way through it, because these doors are funky, small drill hole that would be easy to repair quickly was put in just to start the drill, and then everything was remeasured, that from this edge to the hole, from this edge to the hole was exactly the same distance, so that we're hitting exactly the same place in these 2 doors. It's just, it can be confusing when you've got an odd door, but you just need to think through the steps to it. One of the things you need to keep in mind, because you might wonder, well, why didn't I just mark on the door since I'm going to paint it? But pencil doesn't show up well on this, and marker will bleed through paint. I don't know what it is about Sharpie permanent ink, but it will bleed through and bleed through. So I'm going to be using shellac on this, but by putting the tape on here, I can see clearly where my lines are, and I'm not risking that. Pencil also has a tendency, for some reason, to show through paint. So if you've got big lines on what you're about to paint, you're going to fight it with more coats of paint to hide it, because you can't always clean it off depending on what the surface is that you're about to paint. You can't always get it back off, and permanent marker you're definitely not going to get back off. And since you're going to want to put your cabinets back together as soon as possible, or your piece of furniture, drill the new holes after you have filled. Drill the new holes for the new hardware before you start painting. Then you're not going to do damage to your paint finish that hasn't had time to cure trying to get your holes in for your new hardware. It's just thinking those steps through in order so you don't have headaches later. Because I'm leaving the inside of my cabinet with the original weather vane so that I'm preserving these transfers, I had to think through how I was painting the door. The edges on these doors are dinged up from years of wear. So if I wanted to tape the edge of this door here and just paint the front of the door the yellow, it's going to be uneven. And on any door that closes together, if you don't get the edge completely painted and a little bit onto the inside, you're going to see whatever color is on the inside at different times and different angles. So what I've done is I have taped off with green frog tape the edge here so that I can just paint this and this edge yellow, and the other door has an extension that's totally different that you can see. This here is going to be painted yellow because any crack that comes through here would be able to show this weather vane color that I don't want to see on the outside. And I do want this edge here. The other thing that I did when I was filling the holes is on the back, I used yellow frog tape so that I wouldn't damage the transfer pulling this off later. So once these are pulled off, I'm going to take an art brush and weather vane and touch up these spots where it came through. But that way the transfer is intact and nothing's going to damage that. These needed to be filled twice, which I expected because of how large the holes were for the previous screws, and some damage around this. When you sand, to sand off where you have filled in with the DAP plastic wood, don't do it by hand with just a piece of sandpaper. What you will do is you will naturally make dips. When you're trying to sand, you'll start to sand really hard with your fingertips and you'll create a dip into where you've done the repair. And then when you paint it, you'll be frustrated looking at it going, I can see where every one of those holes is. It didn't work to fill it with the wood putty. So one of the things you need to do is use carpet tape, the really thin, not the heavy, thick stuff. Where I've found it currently has been on Amazon, but you never know when that's going to be available. Some hardware stores carry it. It's a super thin. It's usually got a white tape on it that you pull off that's double-sided. Wrap a block of wood with it and then wrap it with sandpaper. This is 220 grit, and you want to use the block going back and forth. I'm not actually going to sand on this because I've already got it cleaned up, ready to put the shellac on there. But you keep going until it's completely smooth, and when you get down and you look across it, you don't see any ridges of the wood putty, because if you leave that ridge that's higher and dips down into the finish, you'll see those spots as well. So it doesn't take long to do it, but you have to pay attention to what's happening and keep going with it. And then you've got a perfectly smooth finish here. And then what you want to seal it with, so that you don't get dull spots where you have done this finish, whether you're doing stain or paint, you'll get a dull spot if you don't seal it. Seal it with the Zinsser clear shellac. You don't need the primer shellac. Shellac by itself was used for hundreds of years as a sealer primer. But in order to not create a bubble on this, I always check how hard I have to push to get just a light spray. I'm not saturating this because I don't want to see big areas of paint, of shellac on this. And anywhere I'm looking to see if there's any place other than here that it was down to bare wood, because if there was any place that I had an edge of bare wood, I would also seal with this so that you don't get a dull spot. This takes about a half an hour to dry, and when it's dry, then you're going to take probably 320 Grit sandpaper is better, but you can use 220. And you will lightly sand this because it'll have a slight roughness to it. And you're not sanding hard. Just people ask, well, aren't you just sanding off the shellac you just put on there? The word lightly is really important. You're just sanding a spot so that when you reach over and you feel where you haven't sanded, you can feel this one's smooth and this one still has the slight roughness. It takes barely any sanding at all to get that off, but you want it off, or you'll also see that'll be an area where you can easily create texture when you're painting. This door is really heavy, massive, and hard to manipulate. The way the hinges were put on the cabinets to this bedroom suite, it did not lend itself to me having the doors left on and painting. I would have had to have been in with an art brush with probably 5 or 6 coats trying to get into the tight areas and not being able to stipple in them. So it was just so much easier for me to take this off, and the fact that I needed to really have this door flat when I was doing the taping that I showed you on the other side so that I could really get it lined up properly. So, you know, some people like to leave doors on things in paint, some like to take them off. Probably because I've done it most of my life, I find that I paint a whole lot faster if the door is off and not on. And when I'm dealing with crevices like this that are really deep, that I need to be able to see at all different angles, if I'm looking down at it, I can clearly see if I have missed a spot or if I have gotten it all coated. So that is the reason why these are down. And this has lots of areas that would be good for you to see how to handle because of like the grooves down in here and all these different angles on here. The other thing you need to know is when you've got a lot of detail like this, whether it's one of those doors that has front doors that has a lot of boxes in it and a lot of set downs, every one of these deep rims here is a lot more real estate that needs to be painted than you expect. And so it's going to take more paint to finish painting an item that has details like this on it than it would be a flat door or a simple shaker door. I start with the inside of door panels like this. And off camera, I did do the light sanding that I described of the shellac. You'll see me pushing my brush in and squishing. That's how you get into those corners. Otherwise, you wind up with puddles of paint in there when you try to just keep going back and forth over it. All of these marks like this, if you don't deal with them, you get ridges in your door. So before I even do the center, I grab onto those and roll them out smooth. Then I take my roller and come up those areas, and again I'm going to go over that to keep from getting raised paint. when you're rolling this upper edge after you have applied paint, watch, because paint will have gotten down into the inside, and that's why you saw me rolling on the inside where I had already painted. To catch those runs. And right there is one that I needed to look at again. Get that spot with a small brush. It's wanting to lift. This is raised on blocks so that I can paint the edges without painting onto the surface and get a good coverage on it. I'm going ahead and painting this whole section because it's small and it's already got portions of it here painted in the center, so I'm less likely to create texture. I go ahead and apply paint to the whole thing. Well, I will get it on the next coat. You can't get a perfect coat the first coat of paint, so I will just check that on the second round, or I'm going to wind up creating texture there from overworking that. Same reason I didn't keep working that spot over there that needs more. This will dry, and off camera it will get its other two coats. The color of these cabinets, the color Kind, which is a new color by HTP, is a beautiful, very pale yellow. It tends to show up brighter on video than it is in person, but it's a very soft, very buttery color. And it's one that I thought would go very well in this room, and I wanted to add some whimsy to this piece. I had considered white originally, and I considered white again, a soft white, in doing it over this time, but I really loved the color kind when I saw it and said, that will add more whimsy to this and make this a piece that's more playful. And taking all of the extra chunky pieces off the drawer fronts really helped to change the lines of this and change the personality of this piece. Now I don't even mind the pieces, all the cutouts that are in this, the large doors. I chose bumblebee pulls. I had looked and looked to try to find pulls that were big enough for these massive heavy doors, but then were not overwhelming for the other components of this set and the other smaller sized drawers. So these also tie into the fact that I chose not to change the interior of this, which is also why I showed you taping in here, because I wanted crisp lines here. That when you open this, this isn't sloppy, there's not paint everywhere. And now when you open it, you've got the birds, the flowers, and it's a nice surprise when you do open it. The gray and yellow go together very well, especially as soft as this yellow actually is in person. It totally changed this room, and now that it feels very light and bright. I really loved the gray, I loved the charcoal gray, pardon me, the weather vane with the black antiquing, but it made these pieces feel so heavy in this space. Now it's much friendlier. Changing from that tall, narrow mirror that came with the bedroom set to the wider mirror that has just a little bit of ornamentation at the top balances that huge dresser much better. And by just adding a little bit of the pearl antiquing on the crown of the mirror, the light grabs it and you see the details really well, but it doesn't overwhelm the space. And the frame. And I did not want to add antiquing to all of this. I wanted to mute down all the extra details that are on this piece to give it a more simplified, cohesive look. So I hope you've learned some things in this video that will help you, from how to get long tops nice and smooth, how to do mirrors so that the frames are easy to do, and how to break down big panels so that you get a completely smooth, beautiful finish when you're done. Thanks for joining us. Please hit like and subscribe. Give us some comments, share. We love having you here, and we look forward to seeing you in the next videos. Thanks for being here.